Hello, I'm Wayne Emmons. This video presents number 5 of 6 cases as to why the Jewish people claimed the land of Israel. Specifically, the international community promised political sovereignty in Palestine to the Jewish people, even though they reneged on such promises under political pressures from Israel's enemies in the Middle East. I want to encourage you to do your own research regarding this subject and to likewise find truth for yourself. To help you during your research, this video will present historical as well as political events, and I encourage you to check it out for yourself. There are abundant resources available, books, YouTube, videos, and so on, but here is one that I highly recommend entitled Israel for Critical Thinkers. The author is Richard Boss, and he has given me permission to use his format and visuals in today's presentation. Good job, Mr. Boss, and thank you. Today's video links with my case number 2 in a series of 6 cases. It focuses on the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel, beginning with God's everlasting covenant to Abraham. It would be well worth your time to listen to case number 2. But let's begin today's session by looking at political and legal foundations of Israel. The Jewish nationalism movement became known as Zionism. Jews and Arabs were both seeking nationalism at the same time just prior to World War I, even though the idea of unity among the Arabs was foreign until the mid-19th century. Their culture had been individualistic and tribal in nature up to that time. With the emergence of Arab nationalistic hopes, much was dependent on the support of the European powers, in particular British government, just as was the case with the Jews. Unfortunately, the ambitions of the Jews and the Arabs overlapped in at least one critical area. The single unified state that the Arabs envisioned for themselves included the region of Israel, which was, of course, the much smaller piece of land sought by the Jews. World War I changed the course of history for both the Arabs and the Jewish people. As a result of being defeated with the Axis powers, the Ottoman Empire was required to relinquish their land we know today as the Middle East. Now, both the Jews and the Arabs had fought with the victorious Allied powers and now were seeking territory for their own. The Jews sought Israel, and the Arabs sought an area that included the Arabian Peninsula, Mesopotamia, or Iraq as we know, and Syria, as well as Israel. The British government was designated by the Allied powers to assist with dividing the former Ottoman land between the two peoples. Resulting pledges came into conflict regarding Israel, then called Palestine. And the Arabs believed that the British correspondence noted in the McMahon-Hussein document included Palestine or Israel to their side. However, McMahon is quoted with affirmation that, I quote, "I feel it my duty to state, and I do so definitely and emphatically, that it was not intended by me in giving the pledge to King Hussein to include Palestine in the area which Arab independence was promised," end quote. During this same time, the British government was meeting with the Jewish people to discuss territorial pledges. A resulting Balfour Declaration was issued on November 2nd, 1917. It describes a, quote, national homeland, end quote, for the Jewish people. The declaration's reference to homeland rather than state proved to be a problematic, controversial issue with the Arab people. On January 3, 1919, a significant meeting took place between Chaim Weizmann, head of Zionists, and Emir Faisal, the son of the Arab leader Sharif Hussein, just days before the Paris Peace Conference, at which said territories were to be reviewed by multiple nations. The two men concluded a Faisal-Weizmann agreement. It stated that Palestine would become the Jewish national home and would not be included in the proposed Arab state. At the Paris Peace Conference, Great Britain and France were given the responsibility as mandates for guiding peoples who were, quote, not yet able to stand for themselves, end quote. The focus was on both the Jews and the Arab peoples and their desire for land to call their own. As part of this effort, the conference created a new international order, the League of Nations. The San Remo Conference in 1920 was the next round of meetings concerning the former Ottoman territories. From this conference emerged not only a mandate for Palestine, but also a separate mandate for Syria, Lebanon, and Mesopotamia that included Palestine. The distinction between the two is key to understanding the Zionist claim to Israel. The Syrian, Lebanon, and Mesopotamia mandate assured the rights, interests, and wishes of the Arab populations currently living there. It provided civil and religious rights to Arabs living in Palestine, but not sovereignty rights. On the other hand, the main responsibility of the Mandate Palestine was to follow through on the Balfour Declaration's pledges regarding the national home for the Jewish people. As mentioned earlier, Great Britain and France were designated as mandates following World War I. It was Great Britain, however, that played a more active role. And during the San Remo Conference, decisions were ratified by the 51-member League of Nations, which made them binding international law. The League agreed on three important topics regarding the Jewish people. 1. Palestine was to officially be the place where a Jewish national home would be established. 2. The Jewish national home was to be preserved not just for the 60,000 Jews living in Palestine after the end of World War I, but for the Jewish people as a whole worldwide. And 3. All Jewish people became the beneficiary of the principle of self-determination, self-government, and independence. Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States at this time, was fully in favor of a Jewish state in Palestine and actually introduced the concept of self-determination for the Jewish people. Known as the Council of Four, Britain, Italy, France, and the U.S., President Wilson is seen in the right in the above picture. Now let's move the calendar forward just a bit and hear about Israel under the British Mandate, 1920 to 1947. The San Remo Conference greatly benefited the Arab people overall. Note that the Arabs living in Palestine was approximately only 1% of the total population in the world. However, the Arabs were not content with the outcome of the San Remo Conference. In the wake of the conference discussions, Arab leaders in Palestine stirred up opposition and hostilities against the British and Zionist efforts, and there were violent uprisings from the Arabs against Jewish communities in Palestine that resulted in deaths and casualties. In May 1921, the British appointed a commission of inquiry to investigate the cause of the violence. The British government's solution to the Arab violence was to revise the Palestine Mandate and create a prospective new Arab state east of the Jordan called Transjordan. This revised Arab state consisted of 77% of the territory originally earmarked by the Palestine Mandate. The British policy of trying to appease the Palestinian Arab leadership with the concessions usually made at the expense of the earlier pledges to the Jewish people became a pattern during the Mandate years. Meanwhile, on the ground in Palestine, the actual building of the Jewish national home was being done by the early settlers of the Yishuv, who had arrived from Eastern Europe to live in Palestine in the 19th century. By the late 1920s and 1930s, the leader of the Yishuv, including one David Ben-Gurion, were realizing that political Zionism was on a collision course with the Arabs' political nationalism efforts in Palestine. Despite Arab revolts, even after 77% of the Jews' mandated land had been taken away and given to the Arabs continued with their violence. The British government again established a commission of inquiry, this time resulting in a Peel Commission report of 1937. The report concluded that Arab and Jewish interest in Palestine could not be reconciled and that the mandate was unworkable. The report also recommended that 1. Jewish immigration should be limited. 2. Sale of land to Jews should be restricted. 3. An Arab agency should be created for the purpose of advising and cooperating with the administration on Palestine. And 4. The Palestine Mandate should be terminated. And 5. What was left of Palestine after the 1921 creation of Transjordan was to be left further partitioned into independent Arab and Jewish states. Are you following this? The Peel report actually recommended that a two-state solution would allow for only 10% allocated for the Jewish national home. The Jewish leadership, with wanting an end to the Arab violence, as well as growing anti-Semitic activities on Jews in Europe and other places, prepared to accept the new partition plan. But the Arab leadership rejected it. Thus, the provisions of the Peel report never came to fruition. On May 1939, Britain was facing war with Germany and wanted to reduce its commitments abroad. So the British government drafted yet another implication, this one called the MacDonald White Paper. It proposed that Palestine become a unitary state, in other words, no longer a Jewish state, but an independent Arab state with two-thirds Arab majority. The White Paper also put a 5-year limit on Jewish immigration, and no Jews would be allowed immigration to Palestine afterwards without the consent of the Arabs. This was a drastic revision of the original goal of a national home for the Jewish people, as specified in the Balfour Declaration and affirmed by the 51-member League of Nations. The MacDonald White Paper was rejected by the Zionists as well as the League of Nations Mandate Commission, but the timing of the 1939 White Paper was tragic for European Jewry. In January 1939, Nazi Germany was already moving toward its final solution, complete genocide of the entire Jewish population on this planet. And over the next 5 years, the Jews of Europe underwent mass extermination. The British authorities, despite the League of Nations' rejection of the White Paper, continued to deny entry of Jewish refugees seeking asylum in Palestine. While 6 million plus Jews perished in Germany's concentration and death camps, the British enforced the policies of the MacDonald White Paper. The British continued to restricting Jewish immigration to Palestine, even though hundreds of thousands of Jews, survivors of the Holocaust attempts, remained in displaced camps. The Zionists became outraged, and on July 22, 1946, a Jewish parliamentary group blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing over 80 people, mostly British military personnel. The British in 1947, overwhelmed by the problems in Palestine, handed off their mandate obligations to the fledgling United Nations. The result was another two-state resolution in which the population of Jewish people would again be drastically reduced. It would seem with all these facts that the British, and other nations as well, proved to be untrustworthy in fulfilling their obligations to the Jewish people. And we just heard the British simply washed their hands of their botched responsibilities and threw in responsibilities onto the backs of the United Nations. So let's see what happened then. We look at the United Nations and the partition of Palestine. On November 29, 1947, the UN General Assembly approved a motion called for in Resolution 181 in cumulatively reducing the size of the Jewish claim to Israel to 1/8 its original territory, as specified in the San Remo Conference. The Jewish leadership had compelling reasons to reject Resolution 181 on this alone. However, they accepted it because of hundreds of thousands of European Jews displaced in World War II, and they were living in refugee camps with nowhere to go. But wouldn't you know it? Arab leadership flatly rejected this Resolution 181. They made it clear that any attempt to implement it would lead to war. However, after decades of broken promises and resulting persecution, the Jewish people took matters into their own hands and formally declared their independence as a sovereign nation on May 14, 1948, and was recognized as such by most of the international community, including the United States. The Arabs, on the other hand, immediately attacked Israel the day after the Declaration of Independence. I will elaborate further on the events of this war in my case number 6 of this video series, and you will find it to be very interesting. Another important point before we close today's presentation. The British had vividly shown disdain for the Jewish people during this time period. After all was said and done, only 1/8 of land remained for the Jews after the San Remo Conference. And remember, drastic restrictions on Jewish immigration were put in place, as well as restrictions on their ability to purchase land in Israel. And there were numerous instances of violent acts by the British on the Jewish people that were not even mentioned in today's presentation. So to repeat from the beginning of the broadcast, part of the Jewish people's reasoning for their claim to Israel is that on multiple occasions, the international community promised political sovereignty in Palestine to the Jewish people, even though they reneged on such promises under political pressure from Israel's enemies in the Middle East. As also mentioned earlier, it is important that you find truth for yourself. Check out all of this information for yourself, but perhaps what you have heard today will help you during this searching. And by no means, don't trust mainstream media. They have distorted truth for decades. Do your own research. Make up your own mind. Seek, and you will find truth. If you are watching this on YouTube and you would like to hear more related subjects, click on the subscribe button below. And if you please, click on the like button to let others know about what you have heard today. This is Wayne Ammons helping you find truth, and I hope you will discover it for yourself. May God bless you.